George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
The British Prime Minister, Sir Frank Forter, the worst mistake he has ever made. In front of millions of watching viewers around the world, he demanded the return of the Israeli sausages. And the Labour conference in Liverpool has sunk into a cold, toxic stew with betrayal and violence on the conference floor. And mass bloodshed in the Lebanon as the criminal regime of Benjamin Netanyahu, having tired momentarily of slaughtering solely Palestinians in Gaza, has decided to let other Arab people have it in the Bekaa Valley, in the south of Lebanon, and even in the capital, Beirut. And the sinking campaign of Kamala Harris will not be able to survive that. The chances of the Democrats winning Michigan are now zero, winning Wisconsin close to zero, and well less than half a chance of winning in Pennsylvania. And without those three states, no Democrat can possibly be elected as president. So fasten your seatbelts. It's President Donald Trump on his way. We'll have to give him renewed attention because this is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
The slew of corruption allegations against Sir Keir Starmer personally, his family, in addition, and his top lieutenants is growing more damaging by the hour. The latest breaking in the last few hours is that the British Prime Minister accepted £20,000 from Lord Ali, the purveyor of his wife's underwear, for accommodation for his son to study for his A-levels. He lives in a very big house with very thick walls, and there are never any reporters outside, unlike outside the home of his predecessor, whose walls were not thick at all. But Sir Keir claimed that his son could not peacefully study for his A-level examinations and needed a handout of £20,000. That's the price they put on an extended stay for his son, not that Sir Keir was ever there, of course, in a £19 million penthouse accommodation to study for his exams. I shared a bedroom with two other people and studied for my exams there. How about you? This Lord Ali is turning into quite a ubiquitous figure, although none of us know anything about him except he's a billionaire Bangladeshi homosexual with close links to Peter Mandelson. That's the man that had to resign twice from Tony Blair's cabinet as a result of corruption. That's the man who spent his birthday with Jeffrey Epstein, the child sex trafficker who later hanged himself not in a New York penitentiary. What a mess. A man who only 65 days ago was elected, albeit with only 19% of the votes of the people of Britain, is now mired in sleaze that makes Boris Johnson look like a Boy Scout. Well, a Boy Scout leader, if you get my drift. Boris Johnson was accused of illicitly eating birthday cake when he should have been dubbed up in isolation during the COVID crisis. Keir Starmer is receiving scores of thousands of pounds, ladies' lingerie, suits and glasses from Lord Ali, a billionaire Bangladeshi businessman, who turns out now to have a free pass to enter number 10 Downing Street anytime he likes. Well, no wonder. If you'd bought somebody's wife's underwear, you'd expect access to their home at any time, wouldn't you? Maybe not for the purposes that Lord Ali has in mind. His purposes seem to be entirely prosaic. They probably include picking, I said, young Labour members of Parliament, shoveling money into them, I said, and making sure that they pick up safe Labour seats in the last election, so that he is growing like an incubus, a posse of friends inside the Parliamentary Labour Party. It is quite a significant turn of events about which we'll be reporting in close, very close, if we can get close enough, very close detail indeed. The betrayal of Britain's old age pensioners was only made more acute today when the Labour conference, despite every single effort they could muster, voted that the government should restore the cold weather payments that they stole from millions of British pensioners. But guess what? In a democratic dazzle, Keir Starmer has announced that he will not be doing so, whatever the Labour conference thinks. It descended also into violence. A 19-year-old delegate by the name of Daniel Riley, my mother's name is Riley, like me and Bill O'Reilly, he may actually be related to me on my mother's side, stood up in the middle of the speech of Stalin's sister, is the only way I could put it, Rachel Reeves, stood up in the middle of her speech as she grimly churned through all the crimes that she was intending to commit against the working class people of Britain, stood up and wondered why we were still selling weapons to the mass murderer, one of the biggest mass murderers in history, Benjamin Netanyahu. He was seized around the throat and frog-marched out by the throat by Labour functionaries, just like Nuremberg, just like the Gestapo Labour dispatches, very roughly indeed, of any critic who dares to raise their head. I presume that 19-year-old Daniel Riley will not be allowed back in to any Labour event anywhere, and neither will there be any change of heart in the policy of the Labour government to the absolutely unequivocal support that they have given and are still giving, despite all the blood, to the settler colonial regime they call Israel, even though it has moved its mass murder campaign from Gaza, although there's still mass murdering in Gaza, of course, no day off for the poor refugees in the concentration camp of Gaza, but they have moved their killing fields to Lebanon. Lebanon, a sovereign country. Lebanon, a member of the United Nations. Lebanon, a country to which every other country in the world has diplomatic relations, has ambassadors in place, is being remorselessly bombed with hundreds and hundreds of air attacks, killing hundreds and hundreds of people every day, most of them women and children. Was it ever thus? As I said the other night, put the letter H in front of any Arab child and you can slaughter them with impunity. Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, they all look the same. They all are deserving of death, violent, sudden death, delivered from American airplanes, using American missiles and bombs, with British airplanes supplying the targeting information and the offending American and British reconnaissance flights flying out of somebody else's country, namely Cyprus, and the British sovereign base there. This follows on the pager terrorist attack, which attacked in an instant thousands of people. None of them, notifiably at least, Hezbollah members. I know that many children were killed and maimed. I know one personally, a doctor in a hospital in Beirut, who has had his fingers blown off by a pager that blew up at the behest of Benjamin Netanyahu. People were blown up in taxis, in supermarket queues, at checkouts, in hospitals, in schools, in public transport, on buses and in taxis. They were not Hezbollah. They were innocent, ordinary civilians in Lebanon. And the truth is, the West is fully complicit in it. You could tell that by guesswork, but you can tell it even more acutely by the fact that not one single Western government has condemned this vile terrorist attack, the largest terrorist attack ever mounted in the world since 9/11/2001, and nobody has had jack to say about it. What's going to happen next? Well, it depends if this level of killing continues. If it does, it is bound to spark the wider regional war that the Democrats in particular, and they're telling the truth this time, really do not want 5 weeks before the American presidential election. Because this is all happening on their watch. It's all happening via their aeroplanes, their missiles, and their bombs. It's all happening via their total absence of any control or restraint on the violent attack dog that they have done so much to sharpen the teeth of. And Kamala Harris has got to win in Michigan. Kamala Harris has got to win in Wisconsin, got to win in Pennsylvania. At this point in time, I think it can safely be said that there is no chance at all of Harris being the victor in those 3 states. And as any fool knoweth, any Democrat that doesn't win those 3 states cannot possibly be elected President of the United States. So Netanyahu is batting for Donald Trump. There is no doubt about that. He is performing the maneuver first theorized, not first practiced, but first theorized by Richard Nixon, the MAD theory. If you are completely mad and capable of doing anything, everything, it will be a psychological as well as a kinetic blow against them. Well, Netanyahu didn't have to do much to persuade us that he is mad. He's persuading the Harris administration, which, like any owner of a violent, dangerous attack dog, is in some trepidation as to whether to pull on the leash at all, let alone try to muzzle this salivating, snarling killer dog. She can't do it. If she tried to, she'd have her own hand bitten off. All of which leads me to conclude that the presidency is Donald Trump's. Zion Don, they call him, with $100 million from Mrs. Adelson, the widow of the former Las Vegas casino owner, whose mission in life was to stuff dollars down the throats, in the pockets, everywhere they wanted it, of American politicians, has now stuffed an unprecedentedly large amount of dollars into the pockets of Donald Trump. $100 million. Fully a tenth of the entire campaign expenditure. And unlike the donors of Mrs. Starmer's underwear, she does want something in return. And what she wants is the undying loyalty of Zion Don in office to Benjamin Netanyahu. So Netanyahu has bet on a Trump victory. A wise decision, I must say. The American public, who are periodically invited to worry about foreign interference in their elections, are the biggest fools on the planet. The Israelis their state and their lobby in the United States are not interfering in the American election. They are running the American election. They are picking the victors in the American presidential races, and indeed down the ticket if they can possibly get away with it. Now, the collapse of the Eastern Front being gamely defended, it must be said, bravely defended by Ukrainian troops, given that almost all of them are pressed men, swept off the streets of Ukrainian cities, dragged off in front of their parents, front of their wives and sweethearts, pressed into the front line with rudimentary training, have been bravely seeking to hold that line. But that line is now collapsing. I could give you an hourly update on the advances of the Russian forces. And the Ukrainian forces that were very foolishly pushed into the Kursk region of Russia in a kind of battle of the Bulge effort are now surrounded. Thousands are dead. 5,000 of them are dead. Young men sent on a fool's errand for public relations purposes by a coke-sniffing crook in Kiev called Volodymyr Zelensky. What's going to happen next is difficult to see. There are reports this week that NATO are beginning to think about making a joint appeal for a settlement to the Russian president. The Russian president has given his answer in his adumbration today of the new Russian nuclear doctrine. Hitherto, any existential threat to the existence of the Russian Federation or Belarus would be met by a nuclear response. That's no longer the high bar that it once was. Significant aggression against Russian and Belarusian territory will unleash Russian nuclear weapons. So if these much talked about long-range NATO missiles begin to explode among civilian people in Russian cities and towns, there will be a nuclear response if Putin's new doctrine is to be believed. That should concentrate the mind wonderfully. I'm still powering my way through the book I talked about last week, the one which describes how Washington, D.C. would have 15 million people dead in minutes. In minutes. They would die from the shock wave, from the blast, from the heat, from the radiation sickness. And later, of course, those who survived it would die under the darkness of a nuclear winter. That's one missile on one city in minutes. If that doesn't concentrate your mind, then you are definitely not thinking straight. Like the electorates in those Western countries that are daily risking exactly such an outcome. We in Britain are the most recent to go to the polls to elect a government. It's all very well saying that only 19% of us voted for Keir Starmer. It's all very well saying that only a third of those who actually voted for Keir Starmer. By virtue of our cockamamie electoral system, he's sitting on an unassailable parliamentary majority. And he has the means and the will to use it. Britain, of course, would not suffer like Washington, D.C. Britain would be completely obliterated with one missile, with 5 nuclear warheads on it, each one 1,000 times more powerful than the one that was dropped on Hiroshima. Britain would cease to exist, be a field of cinders. There will be no time to regret those who didn't take the chance they had of stopping Sir Keir Starmer, the grasping payola Prime Minister, Sir Frank Furter, and his worst decision ever. Release the sausages. It's the mother of all talk shows.
You have to remember back in 2002, 2003, there was a wish by George Bush for regime change. That's what was driving him. Nothing to do with weapons of mass destruction, which of course didn't exist in Iraq. So they had to construct some sort of formula, some sort of cover story in order to persuade the British public that intervention in Iraq was right. Now, David Kelly, as an expert in weapons of mass destruction, knew that this was untrue. He knew that there were probably no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That was a guy that could have brought down, the whole system.
I reckon you're chaff. You've been thrown up to divert our probing.
The Foreign Affairs Select Committee, that parliamentarian briefing, I think that was an indignity to him.
We saw it on the news, and my very first thought was shock. Oh my God, you know, this man is in the eye of the media hurricane. He should be protected by that at least.
You've got blood on your hands, Prime Minister. Are you going to resign over this?
I don't know the details of how Lord Hutton happened to be selected, but what was certainly the case is that he was the right kind of judge to use from the point of view of Downing Street and the intelligence services as well.
Of the 21 days of hearing, only one half of one day was spent on discussing the forensic aspects. That is disgusting.
We were given the Hutton report the day before. It was published. But actually what happened was he went too far.
The events of 2003 were disgraceful ones in this country's history, and it's unfinished business. Those responsible for an illegal war, those responsible for the death of David Kelly, have not been brought to justice. There's been no inquest into David Kelly's death. There needs to be one. We need to make sure that those who behaved in a reprehensible way in 2003 are finally brought to book.
Well, the excellent news site Squawk Box reports that the £20,000 Starmer donation for his son's study break lasted a month after the exams ended. Well, he needed time to decompress after the stresses and strains of the A-level examination, with every child in the country of his age has to do without a luxury penthouse worth tens of millions of pounds. Now the poll is, will Israel invade Lebanon? We mean by that, of course, a land invasion. Will Israel invade Lebanon? Yes or no? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, or on my X, my Twitter account, or on the YouTube community stream, or on the YouTube stream of this show itself. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to my account. We are headed for 500,000 subscribers and determined to get there in short order, certainly before the end of the year. And if you're watching on YouTube or any platform that allows you to do so, please spread the word that Gerald Celente is coming up next as our guest. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the United States and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the United Kingdom and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the number for the rest of the world is 0044 203 966 2625. Now, incidentally, you just saw an excerpt from my film Killing Kelly. You get that film and another of our films, The Killings of Tony Blair. You get that absolutely free if you support us on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. It was GCSE exams, not A-levels, which makes it all the more remarkable that a boy of 15 was given a nearly £20 million penthouse to go and study in. Was he on his own, this young boy, aged less than 16? Was he studying in that penthouse on his own? Who else was in that penthouse? That's the next question that is bound to be asked. And why did he stay there for another month after the GCSE examinations were already finished. That is a very mysterious twist in the whole stew. Gerald Celente is the Trends Journal. He's the publisher and he's the founder of the Trends Research Institute. Let me say so because he's too modest to say so himself, that the Trends Journal is an absolutely must-read because it's not contemporary reportage of what's happening now, neither is it 2020 hindsight vision of what's already happened. Gerald Celente predicts what's happening next, and he is a must-read, a must-watch, and a very, very popular guest here on the mother of all talk shows. Gerald, let's start with the American presidential election. Only a few weeks to go. What do you think of the analysis I made at the beginning of the show that the drowning of the Lebanese in their own blood under Kamala Harris means that she cannot possibly win those states with a significant number of Arab American and other Muslim voters? She can't win, and therefore the presidency belongs, whether he deserves it or not, to Donald Trump. What say you?
First of all, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you for having me on your show. I greatly appreciate it. It's a real honor, and I admire very much what you do and how you stand up as a real man for peace and justice. I call the elections in America the presidential reality show. That's all it is. Matter of fact, we even own that trademark. And it's when you talk about Lebanon, 90% of the people or more have no idea what's going on there. And as far as the Arab vote going against Harris, it's also going to go against Trump, because he's coming out and saying he will do more for Israel than anybody else, and he's Netanyahu's guy. And remember, he got $100 million at one time from Sheldon Adelson, who's had past both American and Israeli citizenship. And Trump moved the United States Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and said to Israel, hey, you know that land you stole over there in the Golan Heights that was Syria's? It's yours. And he's been pumping up more and more and more that he will do more to support Israel than anybody else. So at this point, I would bet on Harris, and I'll tell you why. Again, we wrote about this in the Trends Journal in May of 2022. It was the midterm elections are in 2022, every 2 years after the presidential election between them. And they were in November. We wrote, and we did a press release on it, we wrote that Kamala Harris was going to take to the streets and Biden wasn't going to run because he was so down on the polls and people were concerned about his aging. We said that the Republicans, despite Biden's low approval rating, were not going to do well in the midterm election because of the strong anti-abortion stance. People are one-minded. Again, as a trend forecaster, it's not what you like, what you want, what you wish for. It's what is. We go by the data and the numbers. So here you got it. They didn't do well at all. And then you got Trump's vice presidential candidate. You know, he made fun of women that don't have babies and on and on and on. So Harris, you go by the numbers. She's going to get the woman vote and she's going to get the black vote. And she'll get a good percentage of the Hispanic vote. Minus a wild card, which could be a war, it could be a market crash, minus a wild card, and nobody could predict the wild cards. We see Harris winning. But it's a toss-up.
We'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Quite controversial prediction from a man who's hot on predictions. But you talked about the age and infirmity of your president. We're in the middle of two swirling international crises, either one of which, or even conceivably both, could turn into World War III at any moment. And we have a president who, when he's not on the beach, on a deck chair, literally, is having his first cabinet meeting in almost a year and being unable to chair it, and handing it over to his wife, Jill Biden. What were the optics of that, and how were they received?
Again, the guy's out of his mind and's been out of his mind, and he's only the puppet for the show. That's all they are. It's a crime syndicate that people call a government. When Biden got elected, we called it the Obama administration 2.0. You look at the guy, the little arrogant boy that's our United States Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken. What was he? He was the Assistant Secretary of State under Obama. It's the same gang. I mean, an arrogant boy. I went to Dalton. I went to Harvard. My daddy was the ambassador of Hungary. My uncle was the ambassador to Belgium. And I'll just give you more crap. It's one big club, George Carlin used to say, and you ain't in it. Look at the little clowns. You're talking about the jerk you got over there that got 19% of the vote. Look at the little Macron Catson with a pecker like this over there in France. Out of his mind, Olaf Schultz, or nothing of a nobody. It's a freak show, and the freaks are running the show. And the gangsters are behind it. Here, you want the data? There's a thing called the S&P 500. 3 companies, BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street, own 88% of it. That we, the people, are nothing more than plantation workers of Slavelandia. Talk about peace, not allowed. Not allowed. All you have to do is talk about war. We got some little clown boy, another arrogant nothing. Oh, I was an IDF volunteer, and now I'm the governor of Pennsylvania, and they had the penis piano player Zelensky over there this week. And what is this guy, Josh Shapiro, write on a weapon that goes in a howitzer? He writes his name on it so they could go how happy he'll be using our weapons to kill more people. I mean, you couldn't make up a horror movie like this. And that's all it is. It's a movie, a horror movie, and you got the demonic czar playing the lead roles.
And you've got the crime syndicate, 5 families, don't you? The Clintons are still around like ghouls. The Obamas, the Blinkens, and so on. These 5 families. Incidentally, I saw that Nancy Pelosi had another good week on the stock exchange. Her husband unaccountably saw a piece of antitrust legislation coming and got out of his holding in that company just in time to make a very large addition to the Pelosi family, crime family finances. It is extraordinary how a great country like yours, a huge country like yours, a country of such achievement as yours, should agree to be ruled by this rather tawdry mafia. I mean, I'd rather put my trust in the Sopranos than in the crime families that are running the United States.
I have to tell you, George, it breaks my heart to see what's happened to this country. You know, I'm a blessed guy. I'm a Napolitano, born in the Bronx, 1946, right after the war, the height of American spirit. I get in a fight with my father, may he rest in peace. He said, "You little SOB. You see, you think I'm telling you what I'm telling you because I want you to be like me? I want you to become yourself." And that's what the America that I grew up in used to be. And now you can't be yourself. You got to swallow my crap. I'm the little politician in charge. Stand 6 feet apart. Put that mask on when you go into an airplane. But you can take it off when you're eating and drinking because COVID knows when you're eating and drinking. I mean, look at the crazy people. This country is gone. It's gone. It's finished. All the dignity, all the respect. In one of my books that I wrote is called What Zitzi Gave Honey Boy. Zitzi is the Neapolitan dialect for auntie. And it's about the spirit of the time. And it was a whole different world, the dignity of the people. And now it's a crap show. So I'm doing everything I can with the magazine. And this week, on Saturday, we're having a peace and freedom rally up here in Kingston, New York. This was the first capital of New York State. The British burnt it down after the Battle of Saratoga. I'm having Judge Napolitano, Scott Ritter, Max Blumenthal, Anya Parampil, Joe Laurie, and others. I'm fighting for peace because you said World War III has already begun. It's already begun. There's going to be a false flag event, something to make it, quote, official. You were talking about nuclear, what would happen in a nuclear exchange. People should listen to John F. Kennedy's farewell. There was a farewell. They shot him 6 months after he made the speech at American University in 1963 to graduating students. Said, if we go to a war with the Soviet Union, life on Earth will be wiped out in 24 hours. That's 1963. And you just said what Putin said. We're going to go nuclear if you attack us with these weapons. We have demonic people in charge. And if we don't have peace on Earth, it's going to be hell on Earth.
You made the point that most Americans don't know where Lebanon is. Most British people don't either, so don't beat yourself up about that. But they're both going to find out if the crazed, unhinged mass murder in Lebanon sparks a wider war. The Russians have military bases in Syria next door to Lebanon. They may decide that that's enough and they're going to start shooting down F-35s given by the US to Netanyahu gratis. They may decide that they're going to support a counter invasion of the Golan Heights to take them back to where they legally belong, to the Syrian Republic. If the Americans get involved in that war, it's going to be big casualties, Gerald.
I'm telling you, this is going to be there's also something, again, you don't have to be good at math to figure this out. There are 9 million people living in Israel. 9 million. About 2 million, at least 2 million of them are Arabs. So you got 7 million Israelis. How about if Iran gets dragged into this? These are the Persians. They're very advanced militarily. There are 91 million of them. Who's going to win? So going back to the dangers ahead and a nuclear war, there's the Samson option, S-A-M-S-O-N. Google it up, anybody. Look at Wikipedia. If Israel's going to lose, they go nuclear. They have between 200 to 400 nuclear warheads. And by the way, nobody else, Iran's not allowed to have them. Only we could have them. I mean, that's the hypocrisy going on. They're going to go nuclear. One of my sayings, George, is when all else fails, they take you to war. Tracking trends is the understanding of where we are and how we got here to see where we're going. Let's look at the Israel war. Let's go back to December 2022. Netanyahu gets reelected. Not my language, mainstream media, with his extreme right-wing government. Week after week after week, we are writing in the Trends Journal. We only put down the facts. Oh, and we subscribe to Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper. We go to Jerusalem Post, Times of Israel. We go all over the world. Anyway, there was the massacre that they were doing to Palestinians in the West Bank, on and on and on. Then Netanyahu tries to push through his Judicial Reform Act, which basically would have said, no, they can't bring me up on charges that I'm being brought up on. We're doing away with the court system and the politicians will be in charge. Facts. 39 weeks of protests in Israel before the Hamas October 7th, 2023 attack. 39 weeks. Not my words, the words of the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog. When these protests were going on? Israel is in a civil war. That's right. They were in a civil war before the Hamas attack. Oh, now the Hamas attack? We only put down the facts. After the Hamas attack, 2 days later, reports came out that we published that the United States and Egypt warned Israel that this was going to happen. And Haaretz has also reported since then they knew this thing was going on. When all else fails, they take you to war. And that's what Netanyahu did. And you look at the latest poll now, his poll ratings went up following the attack of Hezbollah.
Absolutely right. Gerald Celente, you are the trend setter and definitely the man to follow if you want to know what the trends are. Gerald Celente, Trends Journal, Trends, Trends Journal. Follow him now. Gerald, thanks for joining us. Quick break and then it's your calls all the way to the hour. Stay tuned. Well, first of all, Bob Geldof and his good friend Bono are on the other side. It wasn't for South Africa, it was for the Horn of Africa. I was involved in it at the time. That was my job at the time. And there were many differences. First of all, it was easy because of Cold War politics to take a stand on the famine in sub-Saharan Africa in 1984-85. I did so myself, but it was easy to do. There was no Ethiopian lobby smearing you as an anti-Ethiopian racist if you got involved in it. There was absolutely gale force wind of free publicity from the newspapers and the television about the famine in Africa at that time. There is zero publicity in the mainstream media about the calvary being undergone by the Palestinian people in 2024. Thirdly, the artists involved lost nothing and arguably gained much by being involved in that charitable enterprise. Artists today lining up for Palestine, like the great Eric Clapton, like the great Roger Waters, and I'm running out of names already, would not only not be benefiting from putting on a Live Aid for Palestine, their careers would be destroyed, would be brought to a shuddering halt if they did. So I'm afraid none of the conditions which made possible the Live Aid phenomenon exist over Palestine. Indeed, quite the contrary.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, the polls rattling up. Almost 23,000 people have already voted on whether Israel will invade Lebanon. Yes or no. Get voting. There's a legend on the line. All else must clear a path. Erobos in New York on Lebanon. This is the Global University of the Airwaves, after all. Erobos, welcome.
Salubrious late evening to you, the MOATS family, your family, and all the supporters and listeners. It was great to see Mr. Celente again. I've actually met him a few times, and his on-screen persona is diametrically opposite to his actual persona. He's actually a very calm and chill type of man in real life, in la vida real, as they would say. It was great to see him again in his smoke jacket and Masterpiece Theater background. I'm calling today to give my perspective about Iran and what I term the Russo-sinification of Iran's economy and their military. You know, about 2 years ago, and your other legend from Florida there, Professor Simon, he would remember it a lot better, but they signed a package of economic and security deals when Iran was brought in through the threshold of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And even in their language, in Iran's language, in dealing the blow they dealt to Israel, which was supposed to be a deterrent, and it was just more like an intermission, didn't really deter Israel at all. They even used the same language, that they referred to it as a special military operation. And the reason why I say that it's the Russo-sinification of Iran's economy and military, and as you already know, and as most of the listeners would know, everything we engage with flows through and from the economy. So if your economy is being tempered, if not controlled, by the foreign policy and dictates of another, the trend is, pun intended, the trend is to go in that direction. So it would explain somewhat to me, and again, this is my speculative intuition, it would explain somewhat Iran's hesitance, and they're taking the same approach as Russia in some cases with Ukraine. The problem with this is that it has the fall, or it has the counterproductive measure of actually embolden Israel, the same way Ukraine was emboldened to attack Belgorod and Kursk and wherever else they're going to attack. And I'll just finish by quoting a small thing from Walter Rodney, the intellectual and Pan-Africanist historian from Guyana. He says, "By what standard of morality can the violence used by a slave to break his chains be considered the same as the violence of a slave master?" And I'll paraphrase that to say that it may be a disdain to attack the civilians or the actual military IDF people in civilian attire in Israel, but you could shut down their water supply. You could shut down the electric grid. Without an electric grid, everyone goes back into the Stone Age automatically. You cannot survive properly without electricity. So if you don't want to actually bomb them directly, you could shut down this grid. I'm not in the military, and I'm figuring this out. Why is not Iran doing this stuff? So I look at it at the risk of being redundant and in finality. The Russo-sinification of Iran is what's creating this problem, because they're putting their economy first, which is understandable. They want to become the CEO like Putin and like Xi, but they may not have the benefit of doing that if their supply chains and ports get blown up. Because Israel, a lot like Ukraine, they don't care, right? They don't care about doing business. As long as America keep printing the money, and Euro keep printing those euros, and Britain keeps printing those pounds, they don't care. They'll blow up their ports, hospitals, shipping lanes, whatever. And I just wanted to share that thought, that their strategy of the economy first may not work out the way they think it will. Thank you very much.
Powerful call. We have Seyed Mohammad Marandi, the distinguished professor of American Studies in Tehran, in the second hour. I'll put some of those points to him. Thank you for making them. Will Israel invade Lebanon, yes or no? Get voting, if you will. Now, our podcast is doing phenomenally well, and there are a number of highlights that they pull out for me every week, and here is one of them. Well, it's more a highlight for my good wife, Gayatri. We are now the top English-speaking podcast for politics in the Netherlands, the country of her birth. We're in the top 5 in Lebanon. We must get to number 1 in Lebanon. We're in the top 10 in Namibia and Macau. Can you work that one out? And we're in the top 40 in Japan, where English language podcasts are not easy to find. You can download the MOATS podcast by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. Let's go to Canada, where Farzad is in Ottawa wanting to talk about Israel. Farzad, welcome. What's on your mind?
Thank you, George. First-time caller. I think the first thing that comes to mind is living in Ottawa. We have a huge Lebanese community. So everybody remembers 2006. And I think Israel won't forget 2024 either. I think an invasion is a big mistake. And there's a huge misrepresentation in the media of the mentality of Middle Eastern people, particularly Muslims. And I think Israel hasn't learned yet who their adversary is. They haven't learned that Shia Muslims don't worship death. They would rather die than live dishonorably. And they haven't sat down and studied their enemy. They haven't studied the teachings of Imam Hussein. And they haven't understood that if they beat Hezbollah now, Hezbollah will get bigger and stronger, and that they're the natives there. And this misrepresentation and mentality is not only is it racist, but it seeks to dehumanize the Lebanese people the way they dehumanize the people of Gaza, highlighting them as children of whatever the garbage they say, the children of darkness, and they're the ones who cling to life. But they would rather live dishonorably, and I would argue the Shias and the Muslims who are native to those places would rather die honorably in their homes. Thank you so much, George.
Powerful call, Farzad in Ottawa. Let's go to Professor Simon, another legend at Weaponized News, with some news on Lebanon. Professor, what's rattling? What can you tell me?
Good evening, Mr. Galloway, and greetings to your worldwide audience. Well, in just a few hours, approximately 3 hours, there'll be a meeting at the United Nations Security Council of a rather unusual one, starting at 6 p.m., called by France on the issue of Lebanon. But during the course of the day, we've received a great number of indications, including 2 reserve brigades being called up for service in the north, that it seems very unlikely that the IOF will be moving into southern Lebanon. It's just a question of whether or not they wait for the Truman U.S. Navy aircraft carrier to arrive on station as it rushes across the Atlantic. The other 2 aircraft carriers having previously been withdrawn from the area after several extensions. But it's a question of who's going to pay for this, because at the moment, the United States budget is going to run out, having been repeatedly extended on the 1st of October. And now, in order to try and beat that deadline and then go off for their campaign season with no further sittings between now and the 5th of November, the rules are well and truly out the window. They are literally doing what they call a rules suspension measure, whereby 2/3 of the House of Representatives are going to have to vote in order to get it through in the first reading. And then it's going to be sent straight over to the US Senate, where they've also agreed to throw the rules out the window. And providing they can get 60 votes, it's then going to go through to President Biden's desk before he meets with the other president, Zelensky, who's on a munitions factory tour and speaking at the UN also this week, before they meet at the White House on Thursday, where it seems it's going to be announced, because part of the 3-month rollover that has been agreed does not include an extension on how long President Biden can use what has been called the presidential drawdown authority to send Ukraine American weapons from existing stockpiles. That $6 billion provision is actually due to expire on the 1st of October, despite the general rollover for the budget. So apparently we're told that tomorrow there's going to be an announcement of many weapons shipments, not in the next few days, but over the next months, going indeed into the beginning of the next presidential term in January. So it just goes to show that when they really want to get something done, it can be done quickly, even if it's not actually a very good thing in the light of the revised Russian nuclear missile use doctrine that was announced live on television, in part by President Putin when meeting with the Russian National Security Council. Its use has been, as you have previously described on this show, quite significantly extended. So the hair trigger becomes even more itchy for the fate of the world, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, indeed, Professor Simon at Weaponized News, another man who is a must follow. I want to thank very much Nick and Tony Donovan, who've just sent us $100. Keep it going, George, says Nick and Tony. I take my hat off to the both of you, and I'm deeply grateful. We need your support to keep 2 editions of the mother of all talk shows on the air in these crucial and dangerous times. You can send us, as they just did, on the YouTube facility for making donations, or you can support us on the patreon.com/George Galloway. Max D says they're not going to let Trump win. Already planning a long, slow ballot count where anything can happen as long as it goes the way they want. And Nicola Curtin says Starmer's actions are not protested against, and that will result in no one having any money. Homes will be lost. People will not be allowed to continue to live in their houses. It is absolutely disastrous. Asif is in England, in Eastham, on Netanyahu's address, I presume to the Lebanese people today, Asif. When he told them he loved them, it was just Hezbollah he was after. Is that the address you want to talk about?
No, I was thinking, because the ICC haven't issued the warrants yet, wouldn't this be a perfect time for them to issue the warrants if they have the balls to issue them? And also, finally, Trump just said that because the US dollar is weak, he's going to lift sanctions on Russia and Iran. What do you make of that?
Who said that?
Donald Trump. There's a clip of him. I saw it on Twitter. He was saying that because the US dollar is weak.
Big news if true. We'll check it out over the course of the show, Asif. Thanks very much for ringing. Humba in Germany on Lebanon is up next. How's that for global affairs? Humba in Germany on Lebanon on the mother of all talk shows. Go ahead, sir.
Hello. Hi, George. Thank you so much for having me again, actually. Really just want to say, first of all, actually, the people who are like you, actually, they really, really few. Talking to the truth and trying really so hard to speak out about everything in this world, actually. I just actually want to say about the pagers attacks in Lebanon. I'm just wondering if this kind of attack could Ukraine actually Zelensky adopt these kind of tactics to attack the Russian military or inside Russia, or these kind of attacks could be used actually in China. I mean, this kind of terror that Israel showed us, it's a kind of a new terror that every terror in the world could use this, actually. They could use this kind of tactics to attack everyone in the world. I'm just wondering as well, actually, why the EU are unable to make any kind of significant moves regarding this situation in Lebanon.
They didn't even condemn it, never mind make a significant move. In a way, you answered your own question, and I endorse it. Any terrorist in the world can now perform exactly the same kind of terrorist attack. All you need to do is buy, you don't even have to be a state. You don't even have to be a big terrorist organization. You could be a terrorist-inclined guy working in an electronics shop. You can take all the pagers and mobile phones that are in your shop, open them up, put explosives in them, and sell them. And at a given point, press a button, and they all blow up in the pockets, in the hands, at the ears, faces of the people that bought your product. Anyone can do it. The issue is no one before Netanyahu was ready to perform such a heinous, murderous, and totally indiscriminate terrorist attack. But you're right, Zelensky could do it in Russia. In fact, you don't even have to, in the way that these pagers and so on that exploded in Lebanon, you don't have to take over the supply chain. You can do it at retail level, as I've just described. So even buying, as I will now, Chinese technology rather than anybody else's technology, even that is not a guarantee, because that Chinese technology will sit somewhere in a warehouse, in a delivery warehouse, in a shop, in the hands of the postman. So even that does not guarantee safety. But it's a big step to take. I will be in Huawei from now on, and I advise everyone so to do. But take care where you're buying the device from, for sure. Now look, after the break, we have what will be a very significant interview. Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, Chair of American Studies at the University of Tehran, at this most significant and auspicious hour. No one is better placed to discuss it. And no show, other than the mother of all talk shows, is the place to go to find out what happens next. Stay tuned. Let's take a call from Ontario, where someone wants to fight with me. Oh dear, that sounds fearsome. Gerasimo, what have you got to say for yourself?
Hi, George. The name means the old wise one, and I'm a little bit older than you. I just want to comment on the fact that you tend to exaggerate numbers. For example, you said that 100 million indigenous people were killed in North America. Maybe you meant North America and South America.
No, stop. If you're going to upbraid me, you're going to have to quote me correctly. I said from Canada to Chile. That's not North America. Go on.
The figure by David Smith from the University of Houston is that the maximum amount of people that were killed due to disease and colonial settler fascism was 65 million people, not 100 million people.
You say 65 million. I say 98 million. I have my sources. You've got yours. 65 million is one hell of a lot of people killed by colonialism in the Americas. Can we agree on that?
Oh, absolutely. It's awful. And it continues to this day with this horrible fascist, psychopathic regime in Israel. This is beyond imagination. Netanyahu is a psychopath. And I'm a retired psychiatrist, and I would know what a psychopath is. And he is a psychopath. And the whole Israeli nation is sick with
Now, don't exaggerate, Gerasimo. That's the very sin you accuse me of. No, look, it was once said of me that I cannot see a sparrow without hailing it as an eagle. I cannot look at a blackbird without denouncing it as a vulture. I'll accept that I can sometimes get a bit carried away and be the opposite of economical with the actuality. That's true. But do you realize that you came on here to say that only 65 million people were killed by colonialism in the Americas, amongst the indigenous, whereas I claim it's 98, many people would think you were quibbling, Gerasimov.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Professor Seyed Mohammad Marandi, Chair of American Studies at the University of Tehran, has emerged in recent years as one of the clearest and most educated voices on events in his own region and indeed farther beyond. And we've been lucky from the start of having him regularly on the mother of all talk shows. And he joins us again this evening at what is, to say the very least, Professor, a very delicate moment. How do you see it? And what do you think is going to happen next?
I have no doubt that the Israeli regime will fail in Lebanon. It has failed in Gaza. It has failed over the last year on the border with Lebanon. It has failed in the Red Sea, as we've seen Ansarullah, or the Houthis, defeat the Americans and continue the blockade. And they've had no real success in the occupied West Bank. Many of us, I think you as well, believe that there was going to be an escalation because Netanyahu is not going to accept a ceasefire. So he has only one way to go, and that is to continue the war or to escalate. And for a person like Netanyahu and his regime, escalation seemed to be what was going to happen. Hezbollah, of course, is much stronger than Islamic Jihad and Hamas combined, and along with their allies. It has a very powerful missile defense force. It is well situated to protect southern Lebanon. Its installations are underground and well protected. So the heavy bombings that the regime has been carrying out in Lebanon has been targeting mainly ordinary people. They want people to, they're killing people and forcing others to leave southern Lebanon in the hope that they can occupy that part of the country or to force Hezbollah to accept a ceasefire. But Hezbollah said from the very beginning that they will only accept a ceasefire if the Israeli regime accepts the terms that are acceptable to Hamas. And so I think it's obvious that a ceasefire in Lebanon is impossible. I just would like to add one thing, and that is that many people during the last year, and I think some of them bad faith actors, have been saying that Hezbollah has done nothing and that Hezbollah is only playing games. Well, if it was playing games, we wouldn't be seeing the atrocities being carried out today in Lebanon. Obviously, Hezbollah was putting a lot of pressure on the Israeli regime, drawing away large amounts of troops, large numbers of troops from Gaza in order to prevent the fall of Gaza. And they've made huge sacrifices during the last year. Now the sacrifices are much greater than ever before. So I think that a lot of people owe an apology to the resistance and the amazing work that they've done. This was not forced upon them. They chose to protect the people of Gaza. They chose to make these sacrifices voluntarily. And I think that history will remember what they did.
The number of sacrifices that they have made, as you implied there, have increased quite dramatically. How devastating is the blow of the killing of very significant figures within Hezbollah in what would appear to be a single targeted bombing in the Dahia in Beirut last week?
Obviously, it was significant, and so was the terrorist act that was carried out through the pagers and the walkie-talkies. But these are not going to change the equation, nor are the atrocities that are being carried out now, which is basically the Israeli regime carrying out using bunker busters to bomb homes and to slaughter ordinary supporters of the resistance. This is not going to change anything. The resistance has been expecting this war to come, and it is upon them today. As I said, they chose to defend Gaza, and they will continue to defend Gaza. But overwhelmingly, the assets, the important assets of Hezbollah are underground. We saw that Hamas and Islamic Jihad had hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, very sophisticated tunnels, and they still do. And that's the main reason why the Israeli regime has been unable to capture Gaza. And of course, alongside the heroism of the resistance and the people in Gaza who've been supporting them. And the Israeli regime, if I'm sure you recall, during the initial days and weeks, they were saying they were going to pour seawater into the tunnels, and they were going to pour gas into the tunnels, and they were going to flood the tunnels and defeat the resistance. But the tunnels were far more sophisticated. Brilliant engineers were behind this whole complex, and therefore, when Gaza has such a sophisticated defense system and mechanism and infrastructure, you can imagine what exists in Lebanon. It's far greater. And we've already seen a few weeks ago when Hezbollah published a short clip of one of their underground missile networks. So the Israeli regime cannot have access to them. These missiles exist in different complexes across the country. In the south, they have tunnels across that region. The region itself is hilly and mountainous. I'm sure you've been there before many times. It's also, there are forests and trees. It will be extremely difficult for the Israeli regime to push forward. In 2006, Hezbollah, which was much smaller than today, defeated the regime. I have no doubt that the resistance will defeat them today. And I truly believe that the Israeli regime has made a catastrophic mistake by pushing for escalation against Lebanon.
We'll come back to escalation in a minute, but our poll this evening asks if Israel will invade Lebanon, meaning a ground invasion. How would you have voted in that poll, yes or no?
It's very difficult to say. I think that it's quite possible that there will be Israeli troops entering parts of southern Lebanon. I don't think there will be a major invasion. I'm pretty sure that the Israeli regime knows that Hezbollah has a very sound defense infrastructure. And I think Netanyahu knows that the chances for success are very low. But he's doing this in desperation. And his right-wing fanatical supporters, perhaps they have their own calculations. So it is quite possible that they'll enter southern Lebanon, but that is exactly what Hezbollah has been planning for the last 20 years. Their defense capabilities are enormous, and now all of their fighters, all of their soldiers, all of their commandos and commanders, they are based in these centers. Very few people move around in towns and cities. The strike on Beirut was, I guess, unexpected, but I don't think the Israelis are going to have the sort of opportunities like they had before in the coming days and weeks. And Hezbollah has many commanders and young people who've been fighting and who have very good experience and who are very smart and who are very dedicated. I have no doubt that the Israeli regime will recognize the strength of Hezbollah in the coming days and weeks. If they enter Lebanon, that will be, as I said, the biggest mistake that they've ever made. I think they've already made a major mistake because Hezbollah is striking inside Israel. The more they escalate, the worse it's going to get for the regime. And the massacre in Lebanon as well, George, I think you'll agree with me that What happened in Gaza is catastrophic. Perhaps hundreds of thousands of people have died as a result of this genocide, this Holocaust. However, that aside, if you had hundreds of billions of dollars, if George Galloway had hundreds of billions of dollars, I don't think you could have shifted public opinion across the world the way in which it's shifted because of the genocide. And carrying out these atrocities in Lebanon are only going to make it worse for the Israeli regime. So militarily, they haven't won. Their economy is floundering. But in addition to all that, people across the world are saying to themselves that these fiends have slaughtered people in Gaza, and now look what they're doing to the people of Lebanon. And the collective West is going to pay the price for this, because this is all being done in their name, because they are truly behind it.
In the face of this escalation, which Israel, presumably even its best friends, would not deny that this all represents a dramatic escalation. In response, the resistance in Lebanon has the ability to strike a wider variety of targets. They have eschewed the targeting of Israeli civilians, unlike Netanyahu's forces, who just killed in 1.5 days over 600 people, most of whom were women and children. The resistance has not done that, but also it has geographically limited its targeting. It's true that Haifa has now entered the target list. Prior to that, the targeting was considerably in the north of occupied Palestine. Now it's moved a bit, but it has not moved to where it could move. For example, serious attacks on Tel Aviv itself. These have very largely not been targeted. And the other means of escalation, or definitions of escalation, would be if other countries became involved, which is, if you like, the big question on everybody's lips. And I would be deficient in my duty if I did not ask you it. I know you don't speak for Iran, but you are a clever and well-informed observer. When will Iran answer the crimes committed against Iran, and when will it answer the crimes being committed in Lebanon?
First, I'd like to repeat exactly what you were saying, and stress that it's how extraordinary it is that the Israeli regime bombs and carpet bombs different parts of Lebanon, villages and towns. And the Western media, when they report it, they call it Hezbollah sites or Hezbollah stronghold in order to justify the slaughter. Whereas Hezbollah, in response, as you've rightly pointed out, has been focused on military targets. And yet Hezbollah is demonized in the West, and the Israeli regime is somehow justified. Their atrocities are justified by Western diplomats and leaders in the media. With regards to the Iranian response, I have no doubt that the Iranians will respond. And I have no doubt that the Israeli regime will pay a significant price for their atrocities carried out against guests of Iran, meaning martyr Ismail Haniyeh and his companion, but also the Iranian diplomat, the Iranian ambassador in Beirut, who was injured as a result of his pager blowing up in his hand. He was pretty severely wounded. The Israeli regime will pay a price, but Iran is not going to be rushed into making a decision based upon the emotions of the general public. Iran will have one shot at the Israeli regime that will be acceptable across the world, the global south, because it will be in retaliation. and it will be to create deterrence. And the Iranians want to make sure that the Israeli regime pays the maximum price. So first of all, the delay, part of it is because the Israeli regime has been forced to move around infrastructure. It has been forced to, its bureaucrats, its intelligence agencies, its military, they've been forced to take special precautions in their buildings and so they paid a price. Foreign airlines have halted their flights to Israel or to Palestine. So they've been paying a price, and the Iranians want to maximize that. But also the Iranians want to calculate when is the best time to hit them, when it helps the resistance, the collective resistance in Gaza, in Lebanon, and elsewhere in the most effective way. And I think we should not only remember the fact that the Iranians have paid a huge cost already. The Iranians are not backing away. This is just propaganda made by bad faith actors. Iran has empowered Gaza. Iran has empowered Lebanon. It has empowered Syria, Iraq, and Yemen to stand, and the West Bank increasingly, with the help of Syria, as we all know. That's, Syria plays a key role in all this, and that's why we had the dirty war against Syria. That's what it was all about. People are waking up to the fact that what NATO and client regimes in the region were doing was that they were trying to destroy Syria, so that today, when we have a war, the resistance would be surrounded and they would not be able to get assistance. So Iran will continue its assistance. Iran will continue to support the resistance to make sure the Israeli regime is defeated militarily, economically, and in the eyes of the public opinion across the world. But Iran will strike the regime and it will punish it. We should have patience. Again, if we go back to those people who are saying Hezbollah's not doing anything, well, if it wasn't doing anything, then why is the Israeli regime carrying out such horrific atrocities? And as you pointed out, murdering almost 600 people in less than 48 hours. I think that Iran is doing what it can, and it will continue to do so. And I think that ultimately the Israeli regime will be defeated. The Iranians are known to be very patient, and they don't make. I think Iranians are an emotional people, but their decisions are not made based on emotions.
What do you think of the thesis advanced actually by a caller on this show tonight, that as Iran, Russia, and China become ever closer with increasing military cooperation, weapons supplies in both directions, and of course a closer economic integration, making a very powerful bloc indeed, but both Russia and China are characterized, certainly in the Middle East, with a cautious approach to these matters. What do you make of the thesis that Russia and China are restraining Iran from a response that it might otherwise have made?
I don't think that Iran makes its decisions based upon the requests of other countries. I don't think that the Russians have asked the Iranians not to respond. I've not heard of that before, and I've not heard the Chinese say that either. Actually, while the Russians and the Chinese have been more cautious, it is interesting that the Chinese ask its citizens to leave Israel or Palestine and Lebanon. This affects the Israeli regime much more than it does Lebanon because of the large economic role that China plays. And this is a vote of no confidence of sorts with regards to this Israeli regime. Russia has its hands full in Ukraine, although it has the upper hand. And I think the West has too much on its plate. And that's one reason why they're failing both in Gaza and in Ukraine, and they will fail elsewhere. And I think it's not just Iran, Russia, and China. I think the global South is the notion of Israel being an illegitimate apartheid and ethno-supremacist regime is growing across the global South. It goes beyond just 1, 2, 3, or 4 countries. although it's they don't have one ethnicity, they're European and they come from different parts of the world. The Palestinians are more Semite than the Zionists in Palestine. But in any case, I think that the cooperation between Iran, Russia, and China is growing, especially Iran and Russia. And I think that this is something to be welcomed. But also, I think cooperation across the global South is growing. And also alongside this, I think pressure is building on countries that are not taking the steps that they should. In other words, as the genocide continues in Gaza and genocidal attacks take place in Lebanon, the pressure is simply going to build against people like Erdogan, who continue to do business and trade with Israel and who continue to allow oil from the Republic of Azerbaijan, cheap oil, to get to Israel to help the war machine, or Jordan, or Egypt, or the Emirates. All of those countries that are in bed with the regime are going to be increasingly facing pressure. And while things look calm today, and I think I may have said this once before, while things look calm today in much of the Arab world, we all remember what happened in Tunisia a little over a decade ago, when one man in protest burned himself alive. The whole of North Africa and West Asia erupted. And I think the situation today is far more difficult for the Americans and its client regimes. It's far more difficult today than it was back then.
Professor Marandi, a wonderful tour of the horizon as usual. Thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. A quick break from me, 5 minutes after I was supposed to break. And then it's your calls all the way to Gayatri. Stay tuned. Let me say that you can listen to the audio-only version of MOATS on our MOATS podcast, and the numbers on that are going through the roof. Just search MOATS with George Galloway on Apple, Spotify, Google, or whichever platform you listen to your podcasts on. In recent weeks, it's been the #1 political podcast in Benin, Jordan, the Gambia, Qatar, Jamaica, Ghana, Iceland, Malaysia, Singapore, Sweden, and the Philippines. #1 political podcast in all those countries. Truly, truly phenomenal. Do you know that BBC News has lost 40% of its audience in the last 2 years? It's official. And of course, that is the sensible thing to do. But to get people to tune in and change course and listen to a radically different point of view is even more difficult. But it's happening. And the numbers that we are racking up are now in their millions.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, you've heard the experts. You've got 15 minutes left to vote. Will Israel invade Lebanon? Yes or no? 24,774 of you have voted. Most of you think Israel will invade Lebanon, with the exception, as always, of the X, the Twitter feed. So in Telegram, 75% say yes. In the YouTube community poll, 74% say yes. On the YouTube stream, 72% say yes. And on X, 69% say yes. Let's get that poll up a bit in the numbers and let's see a representative result. Let's take Mark in Detroit, Michigan, much mentioned tonight, Mark, by me and others. Mark in Detroit on the Middle East. Sounds like a deal. Go ahead, Mark.
Hey, George. I noticed something about the attack with the pagers, and I don't know if anyone else caught it. Here in the West, they spin it as more of a James Bond style of attack, but I always thought it seems like it's the Bond villain. It reminds me of the movie The Kingsman, where the main bad guy was messing with people's pagers and cell phones. But my main concern is, where's the Lebanese armed forces in all of this? I know Hezbollah is, of course, rushing to the defense, but you don't ever hear anything from the Lebanese armed forces, the army, or their navy ever responds to these attacks. So I was wondering if you had any information on that.
It's a good question, but this time there is national unity, as I said earlier. That's not always been the case in the face of Lebanon. The Christian militias, formerly known as phalangists and so on, are fully behind the defense of the country from the Israeli attack. Frangieh family, not fascist, but certainly right-wing Catholic, Christian nationalist, they are fully on board. The national unity from the Sunni population, which has not always been the case, is 100%, absolute maximum. So the Arab nationalists, Nasserists, Christian, as well as the political organization and the military forces of the Lebanese resistance are all as one. And the president of Lebanon has said that in any invasion of the national territory, the Lebanese army will be deployed. But the reality is that the Lebanese armed forces have always been more of a peacekeeping, policing type of military. How could it be otherwise when so many paramilitary organizations of such strength and number existed in the society at large? Thanks, Mark. Donald is in Copenhagen. Wants to talk about Gerald Celente's interview. Donald, welcome.
Yeah. Hi, George, again, and thanks for the good work. And I'm born in America in 1942. This Gerald Celente, born in 1946, and what he was describing was, it's an absurdity. This White House, it's just a puppet show. It has absolutely no meaning, and that his idea that Kamala will be appointed the president. I have an idea, but they've already tried to kill the guy twice, with no protection from obviously the shooter on the roof was seen, and they waited until he took a shot and missed, and that was the failure of the Secret Service. But anyway, but when he was talking about this, and I think it'll be a similar situation like Al Gore and George Bush, where they just stop counting the votes, and then they get the court to intervene and appoint Kamala Harris to be the president, which that's my picture of it anyway. But while he was speaking about the situation in the United States, and I saw that he almost cried, for Christ's sake, the pain in his face and the tears coming up to his eyes of what that country could have been and would have been and could have been had it not been this globalization and this takeover of these entities like BlackRock and so on, and the military-industrial complex and whatnot, and putting it, and then just gaslighting the people over there. They absolutely have no idea of what's going on in this world. And by the way, will Israel invade Lebanon? They already have, with booby traps. It's not going to be like you're going to see tanks and soldiers marching across the border like in the Second World War or any such thing that we saw in Vietnam. It's not similar to that. This is the Third World War. It started, and as long as these people that are profiting from it, it will never end. It's just an ongoing, and it doesn't matter about who wins or loses, as long as it continues and the military industry maintains its profit margin, like the Pelosi's and whatnot, that have investments in these entities, in these weapons manufacturers. That's going to continue until somehow, but if we keep the basic thought with food, shelter, and clothing, all of us need it, no matter whether you believe in Allah or God or Jesus, or if you believe you don't, it doesn't matter. We all need food, shelter, and clothing. And when that starts becoming scarce, and those things are corrupted to the point that, particularly in the United States, with fracking and the toxic. When I visit there, I can't stay in Los Angeles very long. I get very ill because of the toxic water, air, and the pollution levels that are there. And if that continues, something will probably be done as what I would consider to be kind of a revolution in the United States. But anyway, keep up the good work, and we
Donald
need to stop
in Copenhagen predicts revolution in the United States on the mother of all talk shows. You'll be getting us all arrested. Alexander G gives 100 NOK and says they told civilians to get 1 kilometer away from Hezbollah living room missiles, then carpet bombed the whole area. Amazing that people still believe the propaganda, NOK being, of course, Norwegian krone. I'm very grateful to you, Alexander. Golden Silence sends $5 says 10 years ago my sister had to travel to Israel. The immigration agent took her iPhone wired headphone apart. That was a confession of what they do. And Karaoke Stars has said, having watched every episode of Have It Out with Galloway, no one has contested you, George. Why? Because you are far knowledgeable. You're far too clever. I take my hat off to you, Mr. Galloway. Well, a few have tried, of course, and it's up to the audience to decide who wins. Thank you for it. The Have It Out with Galloway is doing very well. Its numbers are climbing. The numbers of people seeking to participate is climbing, but could still be greater. So if you want to appear on Have It Out with Galloway on Tuesday nights, here's how you do it. If you want to join me on Have It Out with Galloway, you can be the audience member on that video wall so that I can see as well as hear you. Come and have it out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough. www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go over to Glastonbury, not the festival, but Howard, who wants to talk about pagers and lithium batteries. Howard in Glastonbury, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Evening, George. Nice to hear you, and I think you've done a very good show tonight. I've got quite a lot of experience building lithium batteries, and it was a commercial project, so I won't mention the company, it's not relevant. But what is relevant is the fact that there is a problem with lithium-ion batteries worldwide. They are unstable if they have loose screws, and a vibration is induced into that by the force of the current going through the screw. It creates a vibration. This can lead to a thing called thermal runaway. Lithium-ion batteries are renowned for catching fire. This is the main cause of lithium-ion batteries catching fire. This can be inducted artificially. If you have a pager or a telephone and the calling line can switch to the emergency reception, you get the full strength signal, and at which point, if you induct a signal into the device, you will have a thermal runaway very quickly. This is not me making anything up. This is proven science. The physics has been replicated and duplicated in a number of places worldwide. And the stories that the media, and I won't say who's pushing it, but the stories that the media are pushing out are that you need to get at the devices. This is probably not true.
Well, what a call from Howard in Glastonbury, voice of science and engineering, and we're very grateful to him for it. Strive for Balance says, thank you, George Galloway, for your brilliance and ceaseless dedication to truth, peace, and justice. You should be the PM, you know. Well, that ain't going to happen, Strive for Balance. I couldn't even be the MP, never mind PM. But I did do my bit, and I'm continuing to do it. on other stages other than the parliamentary. Well, my good wife is in the studio. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, the question that you asked Professor Seyed Marandi is a question that, as you said, is on everyone's lips and has been discussed throughout. Walter Cairn says, the question why Iran has not intervened so far could be that they have recently joined the BRICS Association and occupies a key position in the Belt and Road Initiative. At a time when it is beset with all manners of economic sanctions, they may not want to imperil the success of these projects.
I think that's what Erebos was implying. Exactly. It's the economy is stupid.
Exactly.
Which is not quite what you would associate with a revolutionary government like the one in Tehran, an Islamic revolutionary government for that matter. And Professor Marandi batted it away. But it's obviously a legitimate line of speculation.
It is the economic stupid. Phil Collins says then, George, do you think that Iran might be delaying its response until the first anniversary, which is coming up soon?
Phil Collins, something in the air tonight? Well, maybe intelligent speculation again.
Let's go to the poll then. Will Israel invade Lebanon? Leslie Hope. They will continue to bomb and terrorize Lebanon from a distance. No boots on the ground because their strength is in technology, not in their army, also dubbed as the diaper army by many. Roy says, the Gaza Strip is surrounded. Lebanon is not. Israel could not handle guerrilla warfare. All they do is bomb and bomb. And I am a Christian and support Palestine says they can invade it even today if they want to, but they have to say their last goodbye to their loved ones because Lebanon will be their graveyard. Now, what about this one from Oliver? He says, I suggest all people in the Middle East, especially Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, should go to Europe and ask asylum as they are being killed by a terrorist state. Let's see what our politicians will say when 20 million plus people arrive in France, in Germany, on the coast, in the UK.
It's a very important and never discussed point, you know.
Yeah. But it is very clear.
If all the Lebanese who are on the road to the north right now have to keep on keeping on, end up in Syria, which can't handle that number of refugees and which is likely to not try that hard to stop these refugees from moving on into the European Union, all these people who are supporting Israel's wars whilst tearing their hair out about refugees and immigration. Do you know how many new refugees Israel is creating right now? You ready to put them up in a hotel in your town forever at £80 a night? You and I were in Dublin the other day. How extraordinary was it that in our hotel, most of the guests were refugees.
Yes.
And it was a quite decent hotel.
It was a very fine hotel, but they accommodated
the
permanent residents.
Irish government are paying at least 80 a night for that privilege. And almost all of them were Syrian.
Yep.
Judging by the Arabic they were speaking, the accent that they were using. You want more Syrians in your country? You want more Lebanese refugees in your country, in your hotels at your expense? Go on cheering Israel on, you fools. Anything else?
Well, isn't the tagline very quickly, very clear from you? You want no more boats, then stop the wars.
Yeah, you want to stop the boats, stop the wars. It's not rocket science, you know.
It's not. What with the Ukraine war and the horrendous situation and the Middle East, there is no more need than ever for George and the MOATS show. I get the feeling that the general public are unaware of the danger we are all in, and the information they receive from the mainstream media paints a false picture and is full of disinformation. Warm regards from Dr. Ray Higginson. Thank you so much, Dr. Higginson. He's a regular audience caller and has also been on Have It Out with Galloway. So we have
Dr.
seen
Ray,
Dr.
yes,
Ray
thank
by
you,
now.
Doctor.
So thank you for that. Before I close, I want to remind the audience and yourself for the return of No to NATO, which will be going on air tomorrow.
What time?
7 o'clock. And we will be joined by our Rachel Blevins, by Warren Thornton and Ossie Cossack.
He's an interesting guy. I've not spoken to him before.
He is, yes.
It's at 8 o'clock,
8
actually.
p.m. I'm so sorry.
It's all about summertime, GMT and all the rest. 8 p.m. UK time tomorrow on my channel.
Yep.
It is The Roads to World War III. Plural. Roads to World War III. Great panel. It's going to be a great meeting. Tune in at 8 p.m. Thanks, Gayatri. Get your coat on. We are going out for chips. Deborah is in Blackpool. You get great chips in Blackpool. She wants to talk about Keir Starmer. Deborah, what's on your mind?
Oh, George, I'm absolutely fuming. 3 Gear Keir. I had a feeling at the election that I was in a dilemma. We got rid of Scott Benton through having to get 10,000 signatures to cause a by-election. The Labour guy gets voted in, like you, George, in the by-election, and all of a sudden Rishi calls a quick election, and I did not want Starmer to become Prime Minister. George, I wish you had the Workers' Party in Blackpool. I was like, it was either vote for Reform or Labour. That was it, you know, and there was no other options.
Yeah, no,
here.
I understand the dilemma, Deborah, and you describe it perfectly. The choice between two cheeks of the same backside is never an edifying one. Tweedledee is exactly the same as Tweedledum. But from our point of view, my point of view, and the Workers' Party point of view, Labour are the main enemy. Not just because they're in government, but because they are the main deluder of working class people. They have for 100 years, like the fox, deluded the working class that they were on their side when we knew that they were not, and were increasingly less determined even to throw a crumb or two off the table. Now they've dispensed with all pretense. They are more corrupt than the Tories. They are more right-wing than the Tories. They are more warlike than the Tories. They're more determined to privatise our National Health Service than the Tories. So they're not the lesser of two evils, Debs. They are more evil than the Tories. What say you?
The American people don't fall for the same blag that we've got here, George. That's my, because it'll be World War III, and it's, the same with Ukraine. It's NATO and Britain and that Bojo idiot that went and supported the Ukraine, and when NATO was not meant to go eastwards, they've broken all the rules, so why is Britain...
The rules-based international order. They make the rules, then they break their own rules, and still talk about the rules-based international order. Join us tomorrow night, Debs, for the No to NATO, No to War meeting at 8 p.m. on my YouTube channel. Monkey Boy asks, will you and Gayatri be going for sausage and chips? No, we're not sausage people. Not the sausages you get in the chip shop, anyway. Jamie is on the line in South Wales about Harris and Trump. Go ahead, Jamie.
Hello? Hello?
You're on the air, Jamie.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, the whole world is waiting. Yeah, the world is waiting. Speak up or forever hold your peace.
I'm speaking. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, the whole world can hear you.
Oh, right. I didn't know. I'm sorry. Right. I was watching the debate, and I've studied photography in the past. So when I was watching the setup and walking the dog, I'm out of breath. So when I was watching the setup, I think there's something wrong here. And So I started deconstructing what's going on, and the more I started uncovering, the more, well, you know what it's like when you start clicking onto things. Well, they did everything they can to make one of the candidates look fantastic and the other one look terrible. So, they focused in the wrong area for Donald Trump, I mean. They were focused on the background, which meant his face was out of focus. The aperture was wide, so it was like overexposed. The badge on his lapel, that was all blurry. The mic stand, have a look at the mic stand when he's talking. It's out of focus. Whereas when you look at Kamala Harris on the other side, everything was pin sharp, perfectly pin sharp. All the shadows were retained. They put the flattering light on her. Even Donald Trump's hair looked like blue. I'm thinking, why has he dyed his hair? So the more I looked into it, they even mucked around with the podium. And the camera angles that they shot Trump from was like from a lower angle. And I just think, oh, that's balmy, and that's disgusting.
Well, it'll take some flattering light to make Kamala Harris look like a presidential candidate, in my view. I don't agree with Gerald Celente, with all respect to him. I don't believe that Harris is going to win or can win. It seems to me the only hope of those who want to stop Trump is not put him out of focus, but put him out of action. And I hope that he is well seized of that possibility. And Donald, it is not Iran that's trying to assassinate you, you big chump. And now I presume that you already know that, and you're saying this as you did today for effect. Iran is not trying to kill you. Your own state, of which you were the president, is who is trying to kill you. Basil is in Canada, in Toronto, on the corporate media class. Go ahead, Basil.
Hi, George. It's my first time calling, but I've been following you for many, many years. And I want to thank you for all the work that you've been doing well before the Mother of All Talk Shows. I contributed to the killings of Tony Blair when you made that film. And if it wasn't for the likes of you and Chris Hedges and Richard Medhurst and Glenn Greenwald, there would be no reliable source for people to find have access to the truth. And I wanted to just register my contempt for the corporate media class, because even though they've not personally maybe held guns or gone to any war zones, the blood of Palestinians and Ukrainians and Lebanese alike are on all of their hands, and they're shameless careerists who just masquerade as journalists. And the way I see it is that either they know full well what's going on in Israel, let's say, and know that the situation is far more nuanced than they present, and they still knowingly lie about it, in which case, they've sold their moral integrity for a paycheck, which means nobody should trust them, or they don't know what's going on, which means they're not very good at their jobs, and they cast a very uncritical eye.
It means they're too stupid to be doing their job, yeah?
Yeah, so in either case, I don't know why anybody would not instinctively meet anything that comes out of a corporate media mouthpiece with instinctive distrust and doubt. And so thank you for the work that you do, and I hope that your audience only continues to grow.
Basil, la shukra la wajib. You don't have to thank me, but support me, please, through patreon.com/George Galloway, or through the YouTube donating mechanism. Find every way that you can, this is addressed to all of you, to spread the word about this show and our work and how you can see it, so that the audience grows and grows and grows. The audience over the last 7 days, the previous 7 days, so Sunday to Sunday, I don't know what it is now, but it was 4 million views, perhaps for the first time. 4 million views of the mother of all talk shows, which beats into a cocked hat the output of all, I can't think of any otherwise. All of those media hacks and the corporate media that Basil was so powerfully describing. Now, I mentioned Cyprus earlier on, whose national sovereignty we daily breach without as much as a by your leave. Michael is on the line from Cyprus about oil and Palestine. Michael, welcome.
Hello, George. Looking good, mate. I phoned you a couple of weeks ago. A few months ago, a lady phoned about the oil. And then a few weeks ago, I phoned you about the oil. Now, they've cleared Gaza. Now they're going to clear Lebanon. And then they're going to say, oh, yeah, we're going to rebuild it for you. And oh, yeah. Full of old BS, what they normally come out with, because everything what comes out of Netanyahu's mouth is BS. So what they're going to do now, because they don't take any notice of anybody, the whole world knows what they're doing is wrong, but no one can say anything to the Israelis because of the Americans. So it's definitely the oil. If you look at the money, where the money is and the investment they've done in Eastern Mediterranean, a couple of the firms are Israeli. So it's just about the oil. They're clearing out Lebanon, they've cleared out Gaza, so they can claim the rights to it. And that's all it is. It's just all about the money because...
Well, I mean, I'm familiar with that thesis, Michael. I'm sorry to hurry you because we are approaching the hour very quickly. Thanks for that call from Cyprus. I'm familiar with that thesis, of course, but I don't believe that the settler state will be able to clear Gaza or able to clear the West Bank, and definitely they will never clear Lebanon. Lebanon is a bridge too far for them. It's the very definition of biting off something you will be unable to chew. So whilst they would dearly like that, I don't believe for 1 minute that they will achieve that. Because what that thesis misses out is the R word, resistance. The Palestinian people will never relinquish their resistance. The Lebanese people will never relinquish their resistance, and therefore the exploitation by Israel of Gazan and especially Lebanese oil reserves will never happen. It's a dream in the Zionist mind, I have no doubt. Tom says Gayatri needs George to take her to a 5-star and not the Dublin Travel Lodge. Let me tell you, it wasn't any travel lodge. It was a hotel called The Address, a very nice hotel with very nice people working in it, right opposite Connolly Station, and not far from the river by the quays where Gayatri and I had a very important meeting the other day. So it wasn't a travel lodge. I would never take my wife to a travel lodge, though she often takes me to a travel lodge because she is Dutch, you see, and very parsimonious indeed. But I would never take her to a travel lodge. I don't know if we'll be going back until the matter reaches court. I'm legally forbidden, precluded from telling you how the meeting with Elon Musk's legal representatives went, but I think I can say that it did not go well enough in order for us to avoid a court battle early in the new year in the Dublin High Court, in which I can announce to you and I suppose to them that at this point I fully intend to be a litigant in person. Indeed, it will be me there on the floor of the court with Elon Musk's lawyers. With my short sword, I will dispense with a round shield, but I'm a short sword fighter of some note and some experience. So get ready for what will be the mother of all court battles in Dublin early in the new year. And we will not be staying in the Dublin Travel Lodge. Neither will we be staying in the Address because I've just blown the address and we like to keep a low profile. Mole says George Galloway is the literal definition of a hero. like he is the living embodiment of someone who is using his life for the greater good and for the betterment of life for all humans. What a guy. Thank you, Mol. These are very powerful and moving words. I'm grateful for them. Pagal Insan says, George, I have never been part of any Patreon community, but if I do, it's going to be you, sir. I hope so. Thank you to all those who waited on the line and didn't get on the show. If you call back again on Sunday, we will prioritize you. It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. Gayatri and I are going to watch Manchester United playing 20 Enschede, or however you pronounce that in Dutch. I'm sure she's going to educate me. But we'll have a bag of chips. For her, I'm off the chips because I'm trying to lose weight. See you on Sunday, God willing, for the mother of all talk shows.